Captain Lee Daeho gripped the shuttle's armrest as they approached the most intimidating structure he'd ever seen. The Galactic Tribunal Station stretched across space like a mechanical city, its crystalline towers and rotating sections glowing with alien technology. Massive ships from dozens of worlds docked at various ports, each one representing a different civilization seeking justice among the stars. "First time seeing something this big?" asked Attorney Park So-min, not looking up from her glowing case. Files. Her fingers danced across holographic documents, each one containing laws from species humanity had never even heard of 6 months ago. "Nothing in Earth's fleet comes close," Daeho admitted, watching alien patrol craft buzz around the station like metallic insects. "Those aren't just decorative, are they?" So-min finally glanced up, following his gaze to the heavily armed security vessels. "Definitely not decorative. This place handles disputes between civilizations that could glass entire planets." She closed her files with a gesture, which makes me wonder why Earth's first case requires their maximum security protocols. The shuttle pilot, a nervous young officer named Kim Tae-jun, cleared his throat from the cockpit. "Captain, we're receiving docking instructions. Bay 47, Section Gamma there. They're also transmitting some kind of warning about biological containment procedures." Daeho and So-min exchanged glances. "Biological containment," Daeho repeated. "We passed every health screening Earth required." The docking procedure felt different from standard military operations. Instead of the usual gentle magnetic coupling, heavy mechanical clamps seized their shuttle with jarring force. Warning lights bathed the docking bay in pulsing red as automated systems scanned their vessel from every angle. "Welcome to Galactic Tribunal Station Omega-7," announced a synthetic voice in perfect Korean, though something about the translation felt cold and mechanical. "All Category 9 species must proceed directly to designated secure areas. No deviation from marked pathways will be tolerated." As the airlock cycled open, Daeho straightened his dress uniform one final time. The deep blue fabric bore Earth's insignia proudly on his chest. But suddenly the small patch seemed insignificant against the vastness of galactic civilization. "Remember, we're representing all of humanity today," he muttered, more to himself than to men. "Every word we speak, every action we take, becomes part of how they judge our entire species." The corridor beyond the airlock looked like something from Earth's most ambitious science fiction films, but somehow more alien and unsettling. Bioluminescent panels provided soft lighting while the walls themselves seemed to pulse with organic rhythms. Other beings moved through the space with fluid grace, crystalline entities that chimed when they walked, floating jellyfish-like creatures surrounded by shimmering auras, and insectoid beings whose chittering conversations sounded like digital music. None of them seemed to notice the heavy security escort that immediately surrounded the human delegation. "This way, please," commanded the lead guard, a robotic entity whose voice carried undertones of barely controlled aggression. Its companions flanked Daeho and So-min like they were dangerous prisoners rather than legal representatives. The tribunal chambers hit them like a physical blow. Every surface gleamed with armor plating. Towering mechanical sentries stood at attention beside each doorway, their plasma cannons humming with barely contained energy. The air itself felt thick with tension and the smell of ozone from charged weapons dot behind a barrier of what looked like reinforced, transparent aluminum. A translucent, blob-like judge floated in a specialized tank, its surface rippled with patterns of light that might have been beautiful under different circumstances. Around the chamber's perimeter, armored bailiffs held weapons that could probably vaporize a human in seconds. "What in hell is this?" So-min demanded, her voice carrying the authority she'd developed in Earth's highest courts. The sound echoed strangely in the fortified space, and every weapon in the room immediately swiveled toward her. A spider-like creature the size of a small car scuttled forward on 8 mechanical legs, its multiple eyes focused on the humans with what seemed like nervous energy, and when it spoke, the translation device made its voice sound apologetic yet firm. "I am Tribunal Administrator Vexnari," it announced, clicking and worry with each word. "These are standard Category 9 aggressive species protocols, for everyone's safety, you understand. Your reputation precedes you." Daeho felt his jaw clench as he looked around the chamber. Through transparent sections of the walls, he could see other species conducting their hearings in normal, unguarded rooms. Elegant beings debated calmly while floating in meditation circles. Others communicated through patterns of light or harmonious sounds that resembled singing more than argument. Only when humans appeared did blast shields activate and security forces mobilized. "We came here for justice," Park So-min said, her voice dropping to the dangerous calm that had made her famous in Earth's legal circles, not to be treated like criminals before we've even spoken a word. The moment her tone shifted, every bailiff's weapon powered up with ominous humming sounds. Warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber, and Vexnari's mechanical legs clicked rapidly against the floor in what was obviously extreme agitation. Dr. Kim Hyjin rubbed her tired eyes as she scrolled through endless data files in the station's massive archive chamber. The room stretched out like a cathedral of knowledge, with floating holographic displays showing information from thousands of civilizations. She'd been here for 12 straight hours, diving deep into every recorded interaction between humans and other galactic species. What she found made her stomach turn. "This can't be right," she whispered, pulling up file after file. Each one showed the same disturbing pattern. Every single time humans had made contact with alien civilizations, security protocols had been immediately activated. Trade negotiations, diplomatic meetings, even simple first contact scenarios, all of them ended with humans being classified as potential threats. The archive's AI assistant, a shimmering blue entity that looked like living starlight, drifted closer. "Is there something specific you're searching for, Dr. Kim? Show me the Centauri trade incident from 3 months ago," she requested, her voice barely steady. The holographic display expanded, showing a conference room aboard a luxurious trading vessel. Human Ambassador Young Minho sat across from several Centauri representatives, their elongated blue forms elegant and graceful. To human eyes, it looked like a standard business meeting. Yang gestured enthusiastically as he explained Earth's mineral export capabilities. His hands moved in broad, sweeping motions, his voice rising with excitement about potential partnerships. Behind him, trade specialist Lim Barora nodded vigorously, occasionally pointing at data charts with sharp, precise movements. "Looks normal to me," Hyjin muttered, then requested the alien perspective feed. The same scene transformed into something from a nightmare. Yang's enthusiastic gestures appeared violent and threatening. His raised voice sounded like aggressive barking when Lim pointed at the charts. The motion looked like she was targeting weak points for attack. The Centauri delegates visibly their skin changing to darker shades that the translation system indicated meant extreme fear. "Dear God," Hyjin breathed. "They think we're trying to intimidate them." She pulled up another file. The first diplomatic contact with the Zephyrian Collective, Ambassador Kong Junho had been Earth's most experienced negotiator, known for his calm demeanor and gentle approach. The human recording showed him speaking softly, making small, controlled gestures to emphasize his points about peaceful cooperation. The Zephyrian perspective revealed something completely different. To their telepathic senses, Kong's controlled movements looked like a predator choosing the perfect moment to strike. His measured words came across as calculated threats. The entire Zephyrian delegation had activated personal defense shields within minutes of the meeting starting. Archive AI Hyjin called out, "Show me every human diplomatic encounter in your database." That would be 47 separate incidents across 15 different species. The AI responded, "Shall I compile the security response data?" "Yes, compile everything." The results made her blood run cold. Every single encounter, all 47 of them, had resulted in increased security measures. Some species had requested armed escorts, others had insisted on conducting meetings through protective barriers. The crystalline hegemony had refused all direct contact after their first meeting with humans, claiming Earth's representatives exhibited patterns consistent with apex predators. Hyjin's hands shook as she activated her communicator. "Captain Lee, Attorney Park, you need to see this immediately." 20 minutes later, Captain Lee Daeho and Attorney Park So-min stared at the holographic evidence in stunned silence. The archive chamber felt smaller somehow, as if the weight of galactic misunderstanding was pressing down on them. "Look at this." Hyjin showed them the compiled data. "Every time we've dealt with other species, they've requested maximum security. We're not just seen as aggressive, we're seen as barely controlled savages." On the display, human negotiators appeared to gesture normally during trade discussions. But when the footage switched to show how other species perceived the same interactions, the humans looked like dangerous animals barely held in check. "They think we're about to attack," Park So-min realized with growing horror. "Every time we raise our voices, every time we move our hands, every time we show any emotion at all, they see violence." Captain Lee studied a particularly disturbing clip where a human trade representative had laughed loudly at a joke to the insectoid species they were negotiating with. The sound appeared to trigger immediate panic responses. This explains the weapons, the barriers, everything. It gets worse, Hygiene continued, pulling up behavioral analysis reports. Most galactic species evolved cooperative communication methods. They settled disputes through meditation, telepathy, or harmonious discussion. We're literally the only civilization they've encountered that developed adversarial systems. The next day's hearing proved their fears correct in the most dramatic way possible. Attorney Choi Jinwoo, a brilliant young lawyer known for his passionate advocacy, sat quietly at the defense table as the prosecution presented their case. When they made a clearly false statement about Earth's mining operations, Jinwoo did what any good lawyer would do. He stood up to object. He never got the chance to speak. 3 bailiffs fired stunner bolts simultaneously. The crackling energy, bolts hitting Jinwoo before he'd even fully risen from his chair. His body convulsed once before collapsing unconscious to the chamber floor. Smoke rising from the impact points that the jellyfish-like judge's tentacles quivered with what the translation system indicated was extreme agitation. Emergency recess. Declared until human aggression subsides. Security teams maintain positions. Captain Lee rushed forward to help his fallen teammate, Jinwoo's body limp and still warm from the stunner blast. As he lifted the unconscious lawyer, every weapon in the chamber tracked his movements. The mechanical bailiffs' targeting systems painted red dots across his uniform, ready to fire at the slightest provocation. He was just standing up, Somin protested. But her words only caused more weapons to swing toward her dot around the gallery. Other species watched the scene with expressions ranging from terror to fascination. To them, it must have looked like dangerous predators being contained by necessary force. Some of the smaller, more delicate species had activated personal protection fields, their forms shimmering behind energy barriers. As Captain Lee dragged Jinwoo's unconscious form toward the exit, he could hear the alien spectators chittering and clicking among themselves. The translation system picked up fragments of their conversations, words like primitive, violent, and barely civilized echoing through the chamber. The worst part wasn't the weapons or the fear or even the unconscious lawyer in his arms. The worst part was the growing realization that from the galaxy's perspective, they might actually be right. Dr. Kim Hyejin looked like she hadn't slept in days when she burst into the emergency strategy meeting. Her usually neat hair was disheveled, and her eyes burned with the intensity of someone who'd just uncovered a terrible truth. The small conference room aboard their quarters felt cramped with the entire Earth delegation packed inside. Everyone waiting for answers that might save their mission. "We've been approaching this all wrong," she announced, activating the room's holographic display system. The walls came alive with data streams, alien cultural profiles, and behavioral analysis charts that painted a disturbing picture of humanity's place in the galaxy. Attorney Park Somin stopped pacing the cramped quarters long enough to study the floating data. "What did you find?" "Everything," Hyejin replied grimly. "I've analyzed thousands of hours of cross-species interactions, dating back to first contact protocols from 70 different civilizations. The pattern is absolutely consistent," she gestured, and the display showed a peaceful scene, crystalline. Beings from the hegemony settling a territorial dispute by singing harmonious frequencies until they reached agreement. The crystalline hegemony resolves conflicts through synchronized resonance. Both parties literally tune their thoughts until they find harmony. Another gesture brought up footage of the Zephyrian collective. Floating jellyfish-like entities merged their consciousness temporarily, sharing thoughts and emotions until understanding emerged naturally. The Zephyrians use telepathic fusion, Hyejin continued. They don't argue, they become each other until the dispute dissolves. Captain Lee watched more examples flash by insectoid species that settled disagreements through chemical communication. Energy beings that merged temporarily to share perspectives. Aquatic civilizations that used underwater dance to negotiate treaties. "Every single advanced civilization we've catalogued," Hyejin said, her voice growing more strained, "has developed peaceful, cooperative methods for resolving conflicts. Meditation, telepathy, harmonic resonance, consciousness sharing, all designed to find mutual understanding." Attorney Park Somin had stopped pacing entirely. "Their mistake is thinking we're primitive," she said slowly, a terrible realization dawning in her voice. "But what if their fear is actually accurate?" The room fell silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Outside their porthole, alien ships docked and departed in graceful, choreographed movements that looked more like an elaborate dance than military operations. Somin walked to the holographic controls and pulled up footage from Earth's most prestigious courtrooms. The Supreme Court, the International Court of Justice, famous trials that had shaped human civilization. To human eyes, they represented the pinnacle of legal achievement. "Look at this," she said, activating a recording of a landmark murder trial. The prosecutor paced like a caged animal, his voice rising as he pointed accusingly at the defendant. The defense attorney jumped to his feet, shouting objections with theatrical fury. The judge pounded his gavel repeatedly, demanding order as emotions reached fever pitch. "To us, this is justice," Somin said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Adversarial proceedings, cross-examination, passionate advocacy. We call it the search for truth." She switched the display to show the same footage through alien cultural analysis software. The prosecutor's pacing transformed into predatory, stalking. His pointing finger became a threat display. The shouted objections registered as territorial challenges. The judge's gavel sounded like weapon strikes. "To them," she continued, "this looks like ritualized combat." Dr. Kim pulled up more data, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "Every species they've encountered settles disputes through meditation, telepathy, or harmonious discussion. We're literally the only civilization that treats legal proceedings like warfare." Captain Lee studied the comparative analysis streaming across the walls. Zephyrian dispute resolution looked like a peaceful merging of minds. Crystalline hegemony negotiations resembled beautiful concerts. Aquatic species conducted their legal proceedings like synchronized swimming. Human courtrooms looked like barely controlled battlefields. "So when I raise my voice in their courtroom, double quotes," he began. "You're issuing a battle cry," Kim Hyjin confirmed, pulling up audio analysis of his previous statements. "The computer systems register your elevated tone as an aggression marker. When Somin cross-examines a witness, the behavioral scanners detect hunting patterns. The implications hit them like physical blows." Attorney Choi Jinwoo, still recovering from his stunner blast, looked up from his medical scanner. "Our entire legal system evolved from millennia of human conflict," he said weakly. "Trial by combat, adversarial proceedings, winners and losers. Well, every other species developed cooperative systems," Somin added, sinking into her chair. "They literally cannot comprehend why we would turn justice into a fight." Dr. Kim activated another display showing humanity's evolutionary history. "Look at our development compared to theirs. Most galactic species evolved from prey animals or cooperative hive minds. They developed civilization through mutual aid and shared consciousness." The screen showed Earth's violent history, wars, conquests, territorial disputes settled through force. "We evolved from persistence hunters and tribal warriors. Competition is built into our DNA. Even our games are about winning and losing." Captain Lee stared at footage of a human child playing soccer, celebrating a goal with aggressive triumph while the losing team showed disappointment and frustration. "They probably see our children's sports as combat training, because that's essentially what they are," Jinwoo said, struggling to sit upright. "Every human institution, law, politics, business, even education, is based on competition and conflict resolution through strength." The room's environmental systems cycled, bringing in fresh air that somehow couldn't dispel the weight of their realization. Through the porthole, they could see alien species moving through the station's corridors with fluid grace, their interactions appearing effortless and harmonious. Attorney Park Somin stood up slowly, her face pale but determined. "So we have two choices. We can try to convince them we're not dangerous predators, which clearly isn't working." She looked around the room at her colleagues, seeing the same grim understanding reflected in their eyes. "Or we can accept what we are and figure out how to use it." The team sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in, the hum of alien technology around them suddenly sounding less like progress and more like the gentle workings of civilizations that had never learned to fight for survival the way humans had. Captain Lee Daeho stood before the mirror in their quarters, adjusting the gleaming ceremonial shoulder plates that transformed his standard uniform into something that looked like it belonged in an ancient warrior's armory. The metal caught the station's artificial lighting, creating an intimidating silhouette that would have made his ancestors proud. "If they want to see us as warriors," he announced to his reflection, "then we'll give them warriors." The rest of the Earth's delegation was undergoing similar transformations. Dr. Kim Hyjin had worked through the night with the station's fabrication systems, creating modified dress uniforms that incorporated elements from humanity's military traditions. Polished metal accents, structured shoulder pieces, and ceremonial elements that looked both formal and unmistakably martial. Attorney Park So-min examined herself in the polished surface of their conference table. Her uniform now bore additional insignia and decorative armor pieces that caught the light like a general's battle dress. "This feels strange," she admitted, "but if our research is correct, we need to stop apologizing for what we are." The critical hearing for Earth's mining rights in the Kepler system was about to begin, and everything hung in the balance. The Reptilian Mining Consortium had been systematically overcharging Earth for mineral extraction, claiming exclusive rights to resources that legally belonged to humanity. Previous attempts at negotiation had failed miserably, with human diplomats being treated like dangerous animals, barely worthy of consideration. As they walked through the station's corridors toward the tribunal chamber, other species noticed the change immediately. Where before, aliens had scattered nervously from their path, now they stopped and stared with something approaching respect. The crystalline hegemony representatives actually stepped aside and offered what their translation devices indicated were formal warrior salutes. "Look at that," whispered attorney Choi Jinwoo, still moving carefully after his stunning. "They're not running away anymore." The tribunal chamber had been prepared with even more security than usual. Additional weapon platforms had been installed, and the number of bailiffs had doubled. But when the human delegation entered, something fundamental had shifted in the room's atmosphere. Attorney Park So-min strode to the center of the courtroom with the confident gait of a general addressing troops before battle. Her modified uniform gleamed under the chamber's harsh lights, and her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions. "Honorable Judge," she declared, her words ringing through the fortified chamber, "we stand before you not as supplicants begging for scraps, but as Earth's champions demanding justice." The floating jellyfish-like judge's tentacles rippled with what the translation system indicated was surprise and something approaching respect. For the first time since humans had appeared in galactic courts, the judge leaned forward with interest, rather than recoiling in fear. "The Reptilian Mining Consortium," So-min continued, turning to face the opposing council with predatory focus, "has systematically cheated humanity for 3 years, stealing resources worth billions of credits through fraudulent contracts and illegal territorial claims." The opposing council, a group of 7-foot-tall scaled traders, whose green skin had previously gleamed with arrogant confidence, visibly recoiled. Their leader, a particularly large reptilian named Vexter, had dominated previous negotiations through intimidation and superior knowledge of galactic law. Now he seemed to shrink behind his protective barrier as So-min's gaze fixed on him like a targeting system. For the first time since humans had appeared in galactic courts, the bailiffs' weapons began swiveling away from the human delegation. The mechanical sentries that had previously tracked every human movement now focused their targeting systems on the reptilian delegation. Dr. Kim observed from the gallery, her scientific mind cataloging every detail of the transformation. The same security systems that had treated humans as barely controlled animals now recognized them as the dominant force in the chamber. The behavioral analysis computers had shifted their threat assessments completely. Park So-min methodically dismantled the consortium's case with surgical precision. She didn't just argue their points, she commanded the courtroom like a battlefield, each piece of evidence delivered with devastating efficiency. When she presented proof of the illegal price manipulations, her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Exhibit A shows the consortium charging Earth 400% above standard galactic rates for deuterium extraction, she announced, holographic displays materializing around her like tactical briefings. Exhibit B demonstrates their use of falsified survey reports to claim mineral rights in Earth's territorial space. The reptilian lead attorney Vexter attempted to interrupt with what had previously been effective intimidation tactics. His species was naturally larger and more physically imposing than humans, and he'd used that advantage in every previous negotiation. "The Earth delegation fails to understand basic commercial," he began in his booming voice. Attorney Choi rose from his seat with deliberate slowness. The entire chamber tensed, remembering his previous stunning. But instead of targeting him, every bailiff in the room immediately aimed their weapons at the reptilians who had dared interrupt Earth's legal warrior. "You will speak," Ginwoo said in a voice like controlled thunder, "when Earth's champion grants you permission." The effect was electric. Vexter, who had spent years bullying human negotiators, actually stepped backward against his protective barrier. His scaled hide shifted to darker colors that the translation system indicated as submission and fear. Judge Morthak's tentacles swayed with what appeared to be approval. The Earth Advocate will continue without interruption, the ancient being decreed, its voice carrying new undertones of respect. So-Min smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized her prey was trapped. Thank you, Honorable Judge. As I was saying, the Consortium's theft of Earth's resources ends today. She activated her final presentation, and the chamber filled with undeniable evidence of reptilian fraud, contract violations, territorial infractions, and systematic exploitation that painted a clear picture of criminal conspiracy. Earth demands full restitution of stolen resources, immediate cessation of illegal mining operations, and punitive damages totaling 12 billion galactic credits. She declared with the finality of a military commander accepting surrender. Reptilian delegation huddled together, their earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Around the gallery, other species watched with fascination as Earth's legal warriors demonstrated exactly why humans had earned their fearsome reputation across the galaxy. For the first time since arriving at the tribunal, the humans were no longer seen as dangerous animals to be contained. They were recognized as exactly what they'd always been, Earth's champions, and the most effective advocates in known space. 6 months later, Captain Lee Daeho stood in the same tribunal chamber that had once felt like a prison designed to contain dangerous animals. The fortified barriers remained, the weapon platforms still hummed with deadly energy, and armored bailiffs continued their vigilant watch. But everything had fundamentally changed in ways that still amazed him. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species filled the gallery. Crystalline beings chimed anxiously in their seats while floating Zephyrians pulsed with worried bioluminescence. At the center of it all, the same jellyfish-like Judge floated behind reinforced barriers. But now the protection wasn't meant to keep humans contained. The Andorian Trade Federation versus the Centauri Mining Guild, announced the station's AI in its perfectly neutral tone. Human advocate attorney Park Somin will represent the Andorians in this mineral rights dispute. Lee watched with immense pride as Somin entered the chamber wearing her newly created ceremonial armor. The title Galactic Legal Warrior had been invented specifically for human attorneys, complete with ornate battle dress that incorporated elements from dozens of Earth's military traditions. The polished metal plates caught the chamber's lighting, creating an imposing silhouette that commanded immediate respect. The Centauri delegation, the same species that had once looked down on humanity as primitive barbarians, was already huddled in desperate conference at their table. Their lead negotiator, a tall blue-skinned being named Crindle, kept glancing nervously at Solmin as she arranged her holographic case files with military precision. Your Honor, Crindle called out before the proceedings officially began, the Centauri Mining Guild wishes to propose a settlement agreement. Judge Morthok's tentacles rippled with what the translation system indicated was amusement. The hearing has not yet commenced. Advocate Crindle, surely you wish to present your case. We prefer to negotiate, Crindle stammered, his skin shifting to the pale blue shade that indicated submission in Centauri culture. Lee could barely suppress a smile. The Centauri had been stealing mineral rights from the Andorians for decades, using their superior technology and legal knowledge to exploit the peaceful aquatic species. Now, faced with a human legal warrior, they were ready to surrender before the battle even began. Dr. Kim Hyjin approached from the gallery, her face glowing with satisfaction. She'd spent the last 6 months documenting the complete transformation of galactic legal proceedings, and the results exceeded their wildest expectations. The Zephyrians just offered Earth's exclusive mining rights to their entire home system, she whispered to Lee, her voice filled with wonder. 12 planets, 3 asteroid belts, and a gas giant with rare element deposits, all in exchange for legal representation in their territorial dispute with the Silicon Consortium. Lee shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, they wouldn't meet with us without armed guards. Now they're offering us their most valuable resources. It gets better, Kim continued, pulling up data on her portable display. The tribunal administrators have officially requested that Earth establish a permanent legal defense corps here on the station. They want a full embassy with 50 human attorneys. Through the chamber's massive viewing ports, Lee could see the evidence of humanity's new status. Dozens of shuttles from across the galaxy queued up at the station's docking bays, each one carrying desperate delegations hoping to secure Earth's legal services. The crystalline hegemony had sent their crown prince, the Aquatic Collective had dispatched their Supreme Council. Even the mysterious energy beings from the galactic core had materialized representatives for the first time in recorded history. And the tribunal itself, Lee asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Complete reorganization, Kim replied with a grin. They've created a new classification system. Humans are no longer Category 9, aggressive species. We're now Category 1, elite advocates. The Bailiffs' weapons are still active, but they're protecting everyone else from the crushing disappointment of losing cases to our legal warriors. The hearing began, and Lee watched in fascination as Attorney Park So-min demonstrated exactly why humanity had become the galaxy's most sought-after legal representatives. He didn't just present evidence, she orchestrated a complete tactical campaign that dismantled the Centauri position piece by piece. Your Honor, she declared, her voice carrying across the chamber like a battlefield commander. The evidence clearly shows that Centauri Mining Guild has been operating illegal extraction operations in Andorian territorial waters for 47 years. The holographic displays around her showed detailed mining records, territorial violations, and environmental damage that painted an undeniable picture of systematic exploitation. Each piece of evidence was presented with devastating precision. Building toward an inevitable conclusion, Crindle attempted one last desperate objection. The Andorians never formally protested our operations because your people jammed their communication systems. So-min interrupted, her tone cutting through his excuse like a blade. Exhibit 847 shows Centauri signal interference preventing Andorian distress calls from reaching the tribunal for over 4 decades. The Centauri delegation visibly deflated. Their leader's skin shifted to the deepest blue of complete defeat, and he formally requested immediate settlement negotiations. As the hearing concluded with another decisive victory for Earth's representative, Lee found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them here. They'd arrived at this station as representatives of a species barely tolerated by galactic civilization, treated like dangerous animals that needed constant supervision. Now, human attorneys were the most powerful advocates in known space. Species that had once feared humanity's aggressive nature now fought each other for the privilege of having that aggression directed in their favor. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology, their military might, or their scientific achievements. It was their ability to turn any arena into a battlefield and emerge victorious. What other species saw as primitive aggression, humans had refined into the most effective form of advocacy the galaxy had ever seen. The Bailiffs still wore their armor and carried their weapons. Their targeting systems still tracked every movement in the chamber, but now they served to protect the galaxy's other species from something far more devastating than human violence, the crushing realization that they could never match humanity's legal warriors in the courtroom. Shuttle after shuttle arrived, carrying new clients desperate for Earth's representation. Lee realized that humanity had found their true calling among the stars. They hadn't conquered the galaxy through force or technology. They'd won it through the simple application of everything that made them human: their competitive nature, their refusal to surrender, and their ability to fight for what they believed was right. The galaxy had learned to fear human lawyers more than human soldiers, and in doing so, had handed humanity a victory more complete than any military conquest could have achieved. The end.